As I record this at the beginning of April 2018, there still seems to be a debate going on about Brexit. A couple of weeks ago, an anti-Brexit bus visited my hometown, and it started a furious debate on the town's notice board Facebook group. Now, I believe for the vast majority of the population of the UK, they are sick of hearing about Brexit. Regardless of how they voted, most accept the situation and want the government to simply get on with it. However, there seems to be a very noisy minority who keep wanting to bring up the subject, recirculate the Project Fear nonsense, and rerun the referendum campaign all over again. Now, I voted to leave the EU, but I appreciate that there are legitimate reasons people voted to stay. For example, a friend of mine voted to remain as he was worried about his parents who now live in France. I have absolute respect for people who voted for this and other similar reasons. What I detest is the absolute bullshit being stirred up again, and I intend to do a couple of videos addressing the arguments that those on the pro-EU side keep bringing up, and to point out why they are wrong. Today, I want to talk about quite possibly the most important argument for Brexit, which is sovereignty. Now, how the UK Parliament is elected and how the government is formed in the UK, I think is broadly well understood by the British public. Every 4 or 5 years or so, we all trundle down the local primary school and vote for a member of Parliament to represent the constituency we live in. Then, the party that has the most number of MPs normally gets to form a government and run the country. Now, if that government goes on to pass a law that proves unpopular with the British public, then the electorate can choose to vote for an alternative candidate for a different party, and then that party will get enough MPs to form the next government. That government can then change the law. They might repeal it, they might amend it, but they have the power to do so. Contrast that with the European Union. Again, we vote for MEPs, and they go and sit in the European Parliament. Now, let's say the European Union pass a law that the British public don't like. You would expect that our local MEPs would be able to do something about. In reality, our MEPs are virtually powerless. It is the EU Commission, which is the only body who is able to propose new laws, propose changes, or repeal laws. And they are not elected. Our MEPs, the people we directly elect, are powerless to change an EU law once it is on the books. Since the referendum, we have also learnt that the EU Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker, arguably the man who did more to swing the vote towards leave than anyone else, wants the EU to have even more power over member states. He also wants to end the member states' power of veto. However, by far and away, the scariest proposal is the EU army. An army under the control of the European Commission, the group of wholly unelected politicians who will never get a kicking from the electorate if they fuck up and take us to war. For me, the argument over sovereignty was the strongest reason I voted to leave the European Union. But I will take a moment to address some of the other points that keep rearing their head, particularly around sovereignty. I regularly see people arguing, but the referendum was only advisory, and the UK Parliament should have a vote on whether we should leave the EU. It sounds like a fair point, but I would point out that they did vote. On the 9th of June 2015, the European Union Referendum Act was passed by 544 to 53 votes on its second reading. By doing so, they deferred this decision to the British public. just because some of them don't like the decision is not grounds to go back on it. I also hear people regularly repeating a quote from David Davis, currently the Brexit Secretary, where he said, "If a democracy can't change its mind, then it ceases to become a democracy." And I completely agree. If you want Britain to be within the European Union, then you need to join and campaign for a political party that advocates for another referendum. When that party wins a general election, they can then put a bill forward to the House of Commons for another referendum. If that passes, you can then campaign and hold a new referendum to rejoin the EU. This was the same process from 1975 and the referendum of 2006. Until that day happens, for the vast majority of people who voted either for or against Brexit, please shut the fuck up.